We begin this hour with the ongoing tit-for-tat between the U.S. and China. WikiLeaks has released a new batch of documents being referred to as the U.S. Embassy shopping list. This list reveals American embassies around the globe have been purchasing spy gear disguised as pins, buttons, caps, ties, and watches. The documents were released Friday and were previously an open secret made available through government archives. However, WikiLeaks made this list available after U.S. embassies stopped linking the request to the government website, leaving some to question what the U.S. has up its sleeve and some world leaders, especially China, demanding a response. Joining me now to dig a little deeper is Ben Swan. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, when it comes to this, some of these requests were made for spy equipment in South America. Why would the U.S. need to use spy gear there?
Yeah, it's primarily in Latin American countries where we're seeing this, in El Salvador and also in Colombia. And these requests, again, are for the U.S. embassies. And you went down some of the list, caps, pins, USB drives, lighters, and shirt buttons, cameras that can be disguised as these things. And so I think there's a lot of questions about why this is being done, why it would be necessary. And remember, if the U.S. embassy is requesting this, is this equipment to be used inside of a U.S. embassy? Because if it is, you would assume that all U.S. embassies already have surveillance equipment all throughout the buildings as it stands now. So why would you need these additional items that appear to be something else?
Ben, like you, many people are asking why. Why is this taking place? There are so many questions there. But world leaders, like in China is demanding an explanation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said, quote, "I think Washington should give a clear-cut explanation to the international community on this issue." Although many are questioning the U.S., Ben, the U.S. doesn't have to give an explanation. Is that right?
No, they absolutely don't have to give an explanation. Just as they didn't have to give an explanation when Edward Snowden revealed that essentially the U.S. had been hacking world leaders and foreign leaders. They had been getting into Angela Merkel's private records and even tapping her phone calls. They didn't have to give a reason for that either. So when you're the biggest kid on the block, which the United States has been for so long, you don't really have to answer to anybody. But it's interesting that China is making this an issue. And the reason, of course, for that is because of the fact that the U.S. has been pushing very hard, saying that the Chinese have been spying, planting spyware in electronics and in cell phones. And so because of the back and forth, and you started out with the tit for tat, you said, the back and forth that's been going on between the U.S. and China now for months over these spying issues, this is a little bit of fodder here on the Chinese side to now be able to say, okay, you say that we're spying, so why are you now using your U.S. embassies as locations where you're disseminating from which spying equipment?
Ben, I want to now turn our attention to something I mentioned earlier before introducing you. The government archives were posting these types of requests. But WikiLeaks released this information on Friday because the embassies stopped linking their requests to the government website. Why do you think these U.S. embassies stopped doing that?
Well, I think because it looks bad, and I think that they didn't want to continue to post these kinds of requests, again, making public the fact that they're looking for spy cameras that look like a watch, or a spy camera that looks like a shirt button or a pin or a cap. But at the same time, you would think that the folks who are doing this would be tech savvy enough to know how searchable databases work. And so, of course, WikiLeaks simply went back, because everything's being built on WordPress sites. They were able to go back and create an index, and it's now searchable. So, maybe the U.S. needs to invest a little more on the tech side of being clever about these things, as opposed to the spy camera that seems like it came out of Get Smart.
Do you think this was a good move by WikiLeaks, and does it appear that WikiLeaks is holding the U.S. government accountable?
Well, I don't know what could ever be considered a good move by WikiLeaks anymore. They've become politically toxic because of the fact that they were so involved in what happened in 2016, obviously in the Clinton emails and the Podesta emails. And so WikiLeaks has, who the right hated because when they were revealing stuff about the Iraq war, now the left here in the U.S. hates them. And so everyone that kind of dislikes WikiLeaks. But I think WikiLeaks has to stay true to what they're doing, which is to continually, do these document releases. It is journalism, regardless of how people feel about it. They put out the information. They're not even really taking a stand on how you should feel about this information. They're simply making the information available. I think they should continue to do it, but I don't think there's ever really a good move they can make at this point.
Ben, I want to read you another quote from the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman who was responding to this. She said, quote, "We'd also like to remind those allies of the United States that on the issue of cybersecurity, never forget the pain once the wound is healed." Any thoughts on this remark?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to this idea that the Chinese right now have been kind of amped up in the way that the U.S. has talked about them. The U.S. has really been pushing China, saying that they are a bad actor when it comes to cybersecurity. They're a bad actor when it comes to government surveillance and spying. And again, through technology, really being unfair about the way that they're collecting data and collecting information. And this is just another example, again, where China is able to say, well, you know, nobody's hands are clean here, right? So if the Chinese hands are not clean, the U.S. hands are certainly not clean. The problem, of course, is that, and Ashley, you know this, is that you're going to be one of the only anchors today in the United States who talks about this issue. It is not going to get massive coverage through mainstream media. They're not going to talk about it at all because it's not important to them. They will, however, talk quite often about the Chinese and what a threat the Chinese are and how dangerous the Chinese are in terms of spying. They will not talk about the fact that in Latin America, the U.S. is, of course, again, you know, sending all this spy equipment into U.S. embassies. And what will be done with it there? We're not sure. Will it stay inside the embassy or go out from there? We're not sure. But the Chinese have to take, I think, every opportunity they can to say nobody's hands are clean here.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Ben, thank you so much. Ben Swan.
Ashley, thanks.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.